February 2013, Minnesota winter. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones. A young woman walks out of her home one evening and simply vanishes. No goodbye, no note, no explanation, just gone. Her car turns up days later in a Mall of America parking ramp, abandoned, doors unlocked, blood smeared across surfaces that someone tried desperately to clean. Inside her purse, paperwork that tells a story of a marriage unraveling. In the trunk, evidence that transforms a missing person case into something far darker. But it's a single frame of security footage that changes everything. A hooded figure walking through the night. And there, visible for just a moment on grainy surveillance, a distinctive white logo on the chest of that hoodie. That one detail, that tiny piece of fabric captured by a camera, becomes the thread investigators pull to unravel an entire web of deception. This is a case about a woman whose marriage had begun to show small cracks, and who was secretly finding comfort in another man. Then, without warning, she vanished. When you hear a spouse has gone missing, what runs through your mind? The statistics, the patterns, or do you still hold on to hope? Think about that as we go deeper. Her name was Kira Steger. In later reports, after her marriage, she'd be referred to as Kira Trevino. But to those who knew her growing up, to her family in Farmington, Minnesota, she was always just Kira. 30 years old, still young, still building the life she envisioned for herself. Kira worked at the Mall of America, actually holding down positions at 2 different stores there, juggling shifts, managing schedules, making it work the way so many people do in retail. Those who worked alongside her painted a consistent picture. Warm, reliable, someone who showed up not just physically but emotionally. She had deep roots in Farmington, a tight-knit family who weren't just names in a contact list. They were active presences in her life. Regular calls, planned visits, the kind of closeness where you notice when something's off. Kira had married Jeffrey Trevino. They'd been married for about 3 years. And together they'd built a life in St. Paul, a modest home, shared bills, the ordinary architecture of a marriage. But like many marriages, there were quiet challenges beneath the surface, nothing dramatic, nothing anyone on the outside would notice. No visible signs of violence or danger, just small fractures forming slowly over time, the kind that hide behind routine smiles and everyday life. February 21st, 2013, a Thursday. Kira finished her shift at the mall, tired but in good spirits. That evening, she and Jeffrey had made plans, a simple date night. They went bowling. Picture it, the crash of pins in the distance, the faint chemical smell of lane wax, the clatter of rental shoes on polished floors, and the low hum of conversations drifting through a busy Thursday night bowling alley. It felt ordinary, familiar, the kind of outing couples do without thinking twice. For all appearances, they seemed like any couple trying to maintain connection through the demands of work and daily life. There's no record of an argument, no witness account of tension, just 2 people bowling, sharing an evening. Afterward, they drove home to their St. Paul residence together. It was a weeknight like any other, the kind that fades into the collective blur. Except this one wouldn't fade. This one would be frozen in time, examined frame by frame, minute by minute, as investigators worked backward, trying to understand what happened next. That was the last time anyone outside those walls would see Kira Steger alive. February 22, 2013, Friday morning. Kira was scheduled to work. Her shift started, the store opened, customers began filtering in. But Kira never showed up. Her co-workers noticed immediately. This wasn't like her. She was dependable. They tried calling her. The phone rang, went to voicemail. They tried again. Same result. The worry that starts as a small seed began growing into something harder to contain. Eventually, someone made the decision to contact her husband. Jeffrey Trevino told them Kira sometimes left for a day or so, that this wasn't unusual behavior for her. He offered explanations that seemed designed to create distance, to buy time. He mentioned the weather. Minnesota in February, always a reasonable explanation for delays. But Kira's co-workers weren't buying it. Word reached Kira's family in Farmington. The phone calls started, mother to sister, sister to brother, that cascade of communication when something feels wrong. And immediately, they knew. The explanation didn't match the person they knew. Within hours, family members were making the drive from Farmington to St. Paul. When they arrived at the house and confronted Jeffrey with harder questions, with the urgency of people who knew something was deeply wrong, his demeanor remained strangely unchanged, calm, almost detached. Where was the panic? Where was the husband desperately calling everyone Kira knew, checking hospitals, filing a police report? That absence of expected behavior created a dissonance that Kira's family couldn't ignore. Something was wrong. Terribly, undeniably wrong. By Friday evening, Kira's family had contacted the St. Paul Police Department. A missing person report was filed. And like every missing person case, investigators began with the basics: victimology and proximity. Who was Kira? What were her habits, her relationships, her routines? And who was the last person to see her? Detectives sat down with Jeffrey Trevino and began the methodical process of building a timeline. Walk us through Thursday night. What time did you get home? What did you do? When did you last see Kira? Jeffrey walked them through it. The bowling, the drive home, going to bed. He said he woke up Friday morning and she was gone. He assumed she'd left early for work or had other plans. On the surface, it sounded plausible. But detectives are trained to verify, not trust. They began cross-referencing his statements against other evidence: timestamps, witness accounts, surveillance footage. Small inconsistencies began appearing, a time that shifted slightly between tellings, a detail that didn't quite align with physical evidence. Meanwhile, investigators knew they needed to check the most obvious location: the Mall of America. The Mall of America is one of the most comprehensively surveilled locations in the state. Security cameras cover virtually every angle: parking ramps, entrances, corridors, stores. They pulled footage from Thursday, February 21st. The surveillance confirmed what Jeffrey had told them. He and Kira were there together that evening. They were seen bowling. They were seen leaving together. So far, his account matched the physical evidence. But investigators didn't stop there. They pulled footage from the days following Kira's disappearance. And that's when something significant appeared. Kira's white Chevy showed up in the mall's parking ramp. Not on Thursday night when she and Jeffrey left together, but later, in the days after she vanished. The car was there, parked, abandoned. But there was no sign of Kira. While police worked their methodical investigation, Kira's family couldn't wait, couldn't sit still. They printed flyers. They traveled to Bloomington, near the mall. They went door to door, asking if anyone had seen her, showing her picture to strangers. Imagine that desperation. The not knowing is its own special torture. Every hour that passes, the statistics get worse, but you keep moving because stopping means admitting something you can't admit yet. The community responded. Volunteers who'd never met Kira joined the search. People gave up their weekends to walk through parks, to check wooded areas. It's in these moments you see humanity at its best, even as you're witnessing circumstances at their worst. While volunteers searched the physical world, investigators were excavating Kira's digital footprint. In modern investigations, phones tell stories people never speak aloud. And buried in those records, investigators found something that fundamentally changed the shape of the case: evidence of an affair. Kira had been in recent, active communication with another man, identified in reports as Ryan Wendt. Messages, calls. the digital evidence of a connection outside her marriage. This discovery immediately shifted the investigative landscape. An extramarital affair isn't just a detail, it's potential motive. It's the kind of discovery that can transform anger into rage. But the affair cuts both ways as an investigative lead. Was Kira planning to leave her marriage for this other man? Or was Ryan Wendt himself somehow involved in her disappearance? Detectives immediately tracked down Ryan Wendt. They interviewed him extensively. They checked his alibi. And they ruled him out. He wasn't involved in Kira's disappearance. He was a complication in her marriage, certainly, but he wasn't a perpetrator, which meant the focus shifted back to the husband. This is where the case reaches a critical inflection point, where investigative thoroughness meets opportunity. One of the Trevino's neighbors had a security camera mounted outside their home. It wasn't aimed directly at the Trevino residence, but it rotated, sweeping across the area in intervals. Every few minutes, that camera would pan past the Trevino house, capturing just a few seconds of footage before continuing its rotation. Investigators obtained that footage and began reviewing it frame by frame, focusing on Thursday night into Friday morning. And there, in those brief rotating captures, they found something crucial. Late on Thursday night, approximately 2 a.m., a vehicle was captured returning to the Trevino residence. Then, Friday morning at 9:21 a.m., that same vehicle was seen leaving again. Why does this matter? Because 2 a.m. is the dead of night, when most people are deeply asleep, and 9:21 a.m. on a Friday morning, well after most people have left for work. Investigators cross-reference the timestamps with other evidence, including a gas station receipt. The circle was tightening. The window of opportunity was narrowing. Several days after Kira vanished, her white Chevy was officially located by police in the Mall of America parking ramp. When investigators processed the vehicle, what they found transformed the case from a missing person investigation into an active homicide probe. There were red smudges on surfaces throughout the interior. Someone had attempted to clean, hastily, incompletely. Kira's purse was in the car. Inside it, paperwork, divorce papers. The marriage wasn't just troubled, it was ending. Kira had been taking concrete steps toward dissolving her marriage legally. But the most damning discovery was in the trunk, a rolled-up trunk mat stained with blood. Testing would later confirm that blood belonged to Kira. Think about the implications. Her car, abandoned at her workplace. Her blood in the trunk. Divorce papers in her purse. And Kira herself, gone. This wasn't someone who ran away from her life. This was someone who'd been transported, against her will or after her death, in the trunk of her own vehicle. For Kira's family, this discovery was devastating. The hope they'd held on to began crumbling, replaced by the cold weight of probability. The question was no longer, where is Kira? The question was, who killed Kira, and where is her body? With the car discovered and processed, investigators turned their attention to Mall of America surveillance footage from the day the vehicle was abandoned. And they found him. Security footage captured a hooded figure, a man wearing a hoodie with a distinctive white logo visible on the chest. The timestamp placed him there during the window when Kira's car appeared in the ramp. The man walked with purpose, head down, the hood partially obscuring his face. But cameras caught glimpses, the gait, the build, the clothing. Especially that logo, that white logo on dark fabric. After leaving the parking ramp, the hooded figure was seen getting into a taxi. Investigators obtained GPS data from that taxi ride. The taxi traveled from the Mall of America back toward the Trevino's neighborhood. And surveillance from another angle captured a man, wearing what appeared to be the same hooded jacket, entering the Trevino home. That logo became the visual signature investigators were hunting. It connected the abandoned car to a taxi ride to the Trevino residence. Now, investigators had a specific question. Who owned a hoodie matching that description? We're at the point where small details become everything. A piece of clothing, a taxi GPS trail, the neighbor's rotating camera, each fragment building towards something undeniable. Stay with me. The next piece changes everything. With mounting probable cause, investigators obtained a search warrant for the Trevino home. What they discovered turned the residence into the primary crime scene. Blood on the walls. The mattress in the bedroom was saturated with small stains, dozens of them, as if someone had tried to clean up but couldn't eliminate every trace. Forensic technicians brought in luminol, the chemical that causes blood to fluoresce under UV light even after cleaning. The bedroom lit up. So did other rooms. There was a blood trail leading from the bedroom into other parts of the house. Samples were collected from every luminol-positive location. The results came back. The blood was Kira's. This home where Kira had lived, where she'd built her life. This was where she died. The evidence painted a narrative. Violence in the bedroom, attempts to clean up, movement of a body through the house. Investigators now had multiple pieces. What they needed was a direct connection tying Jeffrey Trevino to that hooded figure. They expanded their search of surveillance footage from businesses in the area, gas stations, ATMs, convenience stores, and they found him. Gas station footage showed Jeffrey Trevino wearing a jacket with a white logo that matched the one visible in the Mall of America surveillance. The clothing was distinctive enough that forensic video analysts could make a confident match. Additional footage showed him making an ATM withdrawal during a time frame that aligned perfectly with the sequence of events. The gas station receipt had Jeffrey's name on it. The timestamp fit precisely into the timeline. The hoodie wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It was a direct link connecting Jeffrey Trevino to the scene of the abandoned car, to the taxi ride home, to the timeline investigators had been reconstructing. Every small detail was fitting into place. With the evidence compiled, Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He invoked his right to counsel and remained silent. From a legal defense perspective, this was tactically correct. But from an investigative standpoint, that silence meant no confession, no explanation, no admission. Police made the strategic decision to hold off on formal charging while they continued building the case. And critically, they still didn't have Kira's body. The search intensified. Volunteers continued searching parks, waterways, wooded areas. Near Keller Lake, searchers found a plastic bag containing blood-stained items, a pillow, a shirt, a bra. Divers were brought in. They searched the frozen lake, breaking through ice using sonar equipment. Cadaver dogs worked the perimeter, but Kira's body wasn't there. The search expanded. More grids, more terrain covered. Dogs trained to detect human remains worked tirelessly. Days became weeks. February turned to March. March turned to April. Kira's family lived in an awful limbo, knowing she was almost certainly dead based on the evidence, but without the finality that finding her body would provide. And then, in May, the waiting ended. May 8, 2013, more than 2 months after Kira disappeared, her body was recovered from the Mississippi River. Identification was made through dental records. The body had been in the water for an extended period, and decomposition had progressed significantly. Severe trauma was noted during the examination, though the exact cause of death was complicated by the condition of the remains. What was clear? This was a violent death. For Kira's family, this was simultaneously the answer they'd been dreading and the confirmation they needed. The uncertainty was over, replaced by the concrete, awful reality. Now they could grieve. Now they could begin the impossible process of moving forward. In later victim impact statements, family members would speak about the devastation, not just of losing Kira, but of the manner of her death. This is the human cost behind every case file. Kira was 30 years old. She had family who loved her. She had a future full of moments she'd never experience. She deserved to grow old. She deserved a life. With Kira's body recovered and the forensic evidence compiled, prosecutors began building their case for trial. This is the prosecution's theory, built from evidence and testimony. After returning home from bowling that Thursday night, Jeffrey and Kira got into an argument. The affair had likely been discovered. The divorce papers in Kira's purse suggested she'd been actively planning to leave the marriage. At some point, Jeffrey grabbed Kira's phone. She tried to hold on to it. In the struggle, one of her fingers was broken. What happened next was a rage killing. In the bedroom, Jeffrey attacked Kira with lethal force. The blood spatter patterns, the quantity of blood absorbed into the mattress. It painted a picture of sustained violence. Afterward came the cover-up. The body was moved, placed in the trunk of Kira's car. Late that night, around 2 a.m., Jeffrey returned home after disposing of Kira's body in the Mississippi River. The next morning at 9:21 a.m., he drove Kira's car to the Mall of America and abandoned it in the parking ramp. The hooded jacket with the white logo became his disguise as he walked away from the car. He caught a taxi back toward his neighborhood. Then came more cleaning, more attempts to eliminate evidence that luminol would later reveal, and then the lies, the casual explanations to co-workers and family, the performance of normalcy while Kira's body lay in the river. When the case went to trial, the jury heard the complete narrative, the surveillance footage, the forensic evidence, the timeline built from security systems and phone records. The verdict came back, guilty of second-degree murder. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. He appealed. The Minnesota Court of Appeals reviewed the case and upheld both the conviction and the sentence. The evidence was overwhelming. The investigation was thorough. During sentencing, Kira's family delivered victim impact statements. They spoke about who Kira was, not just a victim, but a whole person. They spoke about the hole her death left in their lives. It raises a difficult question. What really drives someone to kill the person they once vowed to love? Was this murder the result of him discovering her affair? Could he simply not bear the thought of letting her go or seeing her with another man? Should he have walked away, filed for divorce, and allowed her to move on? Or was Kira herself already emotionally done with the marriage, tired of his behavior, ready to start a new chapter, and he chose violence rather than acceptance? Justice, in the legal sense, was served. A conviction, a sentence, an official acknowledgement that a crime had been committed. But justice in a courtroom doesn't bring anyone back. In the end, this case was solved by accumulation, by investigators who refused to accept easy answers, who verified every statement, who followed every lead. This is what real investigative work looks like. Not dramatic confessions, but painstaking attention to detail. Cross-referencing timestamps, following paper trails, believing families when they say something is wrong. Kira's family never stopped searching. Investigators never stopped building the case. And ultimately, justice was served. But that justice doesn't erase the loss. It doesn't heal the trauma. It doesn't undo the violence or restore the years Kira should have had. Kira Steger was 30 years old when she died. She had dreams that went unfulfilled, experiences she never got to have. Her life had value beyond her death, beyond this case. And that's why we tell these stories. Not to sensationalize tragedy, but to remember that behind every case is a person who mattered. What stood out to you? Was it the forensic work, the surveillance footage, the neighbor's camera? Sometimes the smallest details solve the biggest mysteries. Share your perspective in the comments. Which piece made everything click for you? And if you're drawn to cases where we examine how investigators build these complex puzzles, you know where you need to be for the next one. Thank you for being here. for listening to Kira's story with the attention and respect it deserves. Take care of yourselves. Look out for each other. I'll see you in the next one.